If you work for the Catholic Church and want to avoid burnout, overcome team dysfunctions, and put more souls in the pews, we're here to help. I'm Ty Hua, here with my co-host, John Collins, and we're providing leadership development for Catholic ministry professionals. Every week, you can expect practical advice to help you move Jesus' mission forward in your parish. Today, we have an interview with a real live Catholic ministry professional. Emily Leedom, welcome to the podcast.
Real life Catholic ministry professional. Hi guys, it's great to be here. Really quick, I love that you named this specifically for Catholic ministry professionals. I've been trying to introduce that terminology in church work because I think it just elevates and it actually speaks to what we're trying to do professionally in the ministry field. So when a long time ago when you told me that was gonna be the name, I felt really good about it. But it's great to be with you.
Absolutely. I'm actually glad to hear you say that because I feel like there's one group of people that for whatever reason it doesn't quite pop out at them that's what we're talking about. And anytime I've talked to a priest, they're like, "Oh, this is for people who work in the church." And we're like, "Yeah, 100%. That's what we're trying to do."
That's so funny because I was in a conversation with a priest
Mhm.
and I was talking about kind of just stuff that's going on. I'm in the Diocese of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and so we're talking about some of our planning processes that are going on, and I was using this terminology of like ministry professionals, and this priest was like, "Okay, you use that word. What do you mean by that? What is that?" And I was like, "I mean people that work in ministry." And it was like it took him a minute to kind of get on board, because in all honesty I think it was because he was feeling as though some of the people, maybe not necessarily in the Diocese of Sioux Falls, but some of the people that he's experienced that work in parishes wouldn't necessarily be what we would call a ministry professional. It's somebody that's kind of filling a seat or a warm body. And I was like, but that's the problem. Like, we want to start changing this language and actually start elevating what are we doing in the church and who are we bringing in to do it? People that really have the gifts to do it well and the calling to do it.
Absolutely. And that's a huge part of why we started this work is really that we're kind of in an unprecedented era of the church where we have these lay people that have responded to the priest shortage, this real need for lay people to step up. But they've stepped up in a real way where they're getting real degrees and they're getting real training and they're real professionals. And so to provide not just the theological education, but this education, this development that helps us to be better leaders in those contexts and in those roles. So I'm glad. I think you're the right person to answer some of our questions today. But before we dive into all that nitty gritty, the people want to know, who is Emily Leedom? So let me get out of the way. Tell them a little bit about yourself, what your ministry looks like, and just your story.
Oh, well, I'm an old friend of John Collins and Tai Hua, so that is my most important claim to fame. I'm married to a super handsome hunk of humanity named Matt Leedom. We have 3 girls. Blessed is he among women. We got a lot of girls in our house. And I have been working in ministry for 10 years, at least in a professional capacity. I kind of started doing some various things in college, with missionary work and that sort of thing, being a coordinator for different camps in the summer and whatnot. And then I started working actually right away after I graduated. I pursued a degree in Catholic Studies at the University of St. Thomas and started working in ministry right after that, first as an event coordinator, then as the director of discipleship, the director of marriage and family, which was a huge honor, a great joy. I have a real heart for marriage and family ministry. And then most recently, the Lord invited me to take this crazy leap of faith, and I now serve as the executive director of the Lourdes Center, which is a ministry of the Diocese of Sioux Falls. So we're kind of under the umbrella of the diocese. Bishop is our head, and we are primarily an outpatient mental health clinic, focusing on the integration of the psychological sciences with a Catholic vision of the human person, in support of human flourishing. So I have been in that role for 3 years or so. And really it's just been like a tremendous opportunity of growth to be leading my team and kind of yeah, setting a vision for this ministry that yeah, when I interviewed for the job, I just was like, this could be amazing. This little agency could be amazing, and it's proving to be. There's just amazing things happening.
Yeah, being able to see, I mean, what you're talking about is exactly what we're after here on the podcast is finding professionals like yourself who have this vested interest. I mean, they see this beautiful thing that could be that there's this calling here, putting voice to the vision that's there that God has placed on your heart, and then finding real concrete ways to influence, inspire, move, and motivate people towards that end, towards
Mm,
that goal, towards that
mhm,
you can paint for 'em. So that's what we do.
mhm.
But like you said, you and I go way back, especially. One of my first memories, and this will get into our first question here, but one of my first memories is being a young man in Catholic ministry, just starting out my first few years and being surrounded by a lot of other kind of the old guard in the parish
Yeah.
ministries, the DREs, the catechists that had just had been in ministry and working in those roles for a long time, right? And trying to kind of step into this new the 21st century, right? Step into this new era with new technology, a new culture that was emerging, and really we bonded because you came in shortly after me. You're just slightly younger. Um, Came in shortly after
Only
me,
by
and
like a few.
yeah,
You're
kind of
so old.
experiencing, yeah, kind of experiencing a kindred spirit there where,
Yeah.
um, there were things that were genuine frustrations in those moments where we were new coming in and just having a lot of vigor, and then these people who had been around maybe a little longer, feeling a little more burnt out and having a little more weight on their shoulders, and just maybe a little bit of that shine of being new into ministry and that new vigor, kind of wearing off a little bit, and that's really what kicked off this ministry is me entering into that era of meeting with my ministry friends. My wife saying to me, "John, whenever you get together with your ministry friends, you guys just complain. Like,
Oh,
you work for
yeah.
Jesus. You work for Jesus.
Yeah,
Shouldn't it be awesome?" And so
right.
this ministry really stems from a desire to help Catholic ministry professionals experience more joy and more
Mm,
success in their ministries. So we want to feed into those areas where people are feeling frustrated. So where do you see, especially in your position at the diocese, being able to work with so many different people? And I know you've got some transitions going on there in terms of leadership structure of the parishes. Where do you see Catholic ministry professionals getting frustrated in their work?
mm. Yeah, I remember that season too, John. And I look
Hmm.
back at it now and I'm like, man, we had so much to learn.
Hmm.
But praise God for the vigor. And I remember specifically praying when I kind of came up against this conversation with a priest who just said, "Oh, you'll settle down someday." Kind of telling me like, "Pipe down, like you're too eager, you're too you're too fervent or whatever." And I remember specifically praying, "Lord, never let me grow tired of this. Never let me grow tired of this." Um, and it's not always, like it's not always been easy, but I am amazed how the Lord's been faithful to that promise. And yet there are totally frustrations. I think honestly, I think one of the places that I see ministry professionals being frustrated is that they themselves or the people on their team are not actually in the right positions or not set up to actually utilize the gifts that they have specifically been given, the call that's on their life to do the work that God's asking them to do. They're like forced into this like, okay, well, we see that you have all of these gifts here, but really we just need somebody to run the parish potluck. So if you could just do that, that would be great. And I think that's exhausting. I think it's exhausting for the person that's doing the job. And I think it's exhausting for the people around them because they're just not writing with their dominant hand, like they're not utilizing the gifts that they've been given. And I think that can be really frustrating. And don't get me wrong, like the church's arms are so wide and there is truly a need. Like I firmly believe there is a need for each and every gift given to the people of God to serve the church. 100% without a doubt. Even the weird people, even the boring people, even the awkward people, like they have gifts that are needed in the church, right? Um, but I think when we really like get specifically talking about people that are working in this, that are doing this work, I don't know. I just think sometimes we have people that have these abundant gifts, but they're not being given the freedom to utilize those gifts in the way that is most going to help them flourish and grow. And like we all got to do stuff that we don't always like, right? Or that we're not always good at. Um, but I think it becomes a real frustration on teams, on like leadership teams or parish teams or ministry teams. You know, I'm not in a parish, I'm in a nonprofit setting. But I think it's really frustrating for teams um, when there's just not that flow of like all of the gears kind of moving at the same, you know, like kind of firing at the same place. And so I think we need to get better about really looking at what are people's gifts and how can we actually utilize them, give them the space to like to write with their dominant hands. And you know, whatever
Mhm.
the thing is, you know, whatever the tool is that you want to use, like I think strengths. Oh, what's the Gallup Strengths Finder? Yeah, that's what it's called. Gallup Strengths
Mhm.
Finder. I think that's really helpful. I'm a big fan of the temperaments, just like understanding who you are, how you operate in the world. Myers-Briggs, like any of those tools, I think are helpful in allowing people to discover their own giftedness. Catherine of
Mhm.
Siena's, you know, the Siena Institute's spiritual charisms. I think you guys have done
Mhm.
that one, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think those things are helpful to like really look at, okay, what am I good at? What actually drains me? And then for whatever the task is at hand, how do I approach that task utilizing the gifts that I have so that I'm not a drain to myself or to my team?
I'm curious because I do think that's a specific pain, frustration point in especially a parish setting where you've got someone who is placed in this position and there's just not much to do as far as the team. They just inherit this person that's given to them, right? How do you? I'm curious how you, as a leader who sees though, even on any given team, if someone's not allowed to work in an area where they have some strengths, if they're kind of pushed into that area, how do you encourage your team to advocate for themselves or to voice that or to continue to work towards a team harmony where people are able to step more into a role that fits their gifts or their unique needs? How does that play out in your
Yeah.
setting?
Yeah, that's such a good question, John. A couple of things come to my mind. I think vulnerability as a leader is huge. So,
Mm.
me as the executive director, am I willing to say, "Oh man, this was hard for me," or "This is not my strong suit," or even to be able to say like, "I'm not gonna lie, I kind of crushed that." You know, like I gave a presentation with my husband last week, and my team and part of it, you know, everything I do, I'm kind of representing the Lourdes Center. And afterwards, my team said, "How did it go?" And I was like, "I'm not gonna lie, we totally crushed it." And so that vulnerability as a leader to be able to say like when are you doing really well, but then there are so many moments where I will say that was not my best work, or I'm just like I just can't get this figured out, or I'm stuck here or whatever. So I think that gives other people permission to kind of speak to their own experience. But then my other thought, and this is going to sound it's going to sound a little harsh, and so I pray that it's just received with like an abundance of charity, that I mean it. I think the leader needs to set an expectation and a vision for their standards and how they're going to operate and where are they going as a ministry. And I think that that leader needs to invite the rest of the team to step up to that vision, that direction, that direction that they want to go as a ministry. And I think when leaders do that, what will naturally happen is that some people on that team will self-select out, and they will start to recognize, shoot, I love this place. I'm fully on board with this mission. I am no longer the right person to really help fulfill this mission in the role that I have or in the way that I've been doing it. Um, and again, I know that sounds a little like cutthroat and I don't mean it that way, but I really do think like part of it is really an ongoing discernment of, am I still supposed to be here? Does God want me here? Am I the right person for such a time as this, for this mission? And in this way, of course, I'm meant to be on mission regardless, but is it in this specific role or is it in this, professional capacity? Maybe, maybe not. Um, so I think that's part of the conversation too that we're afraid to have in the church because it feels uncharitable, right? Like it feels mean
Mhm.
to say like, "Oh, I'm sorry you're not the right fit." But I also think that that's sometimes what's gotten us in trouble in ministry in the past. And like, don't get me wrong, like if you look at the 12, like one of my favorite things about the Chosen series is how they portray the 12. Like this is a motley crew, like so don't get me wrong, like we all have our stuff. Um and there is a hierarchy. I know you talked about this in one of your other podcasts, and I thought it was so good. Like there's a natural hierarchy to the church. So I'm not saying like, oh, the priest that's not super competent at preaching, like get him out. Like that's not what I'm saying. Um, but we do hire people, and we use stewardship dollars to hire people. And I think we want to really hire people that have the gifts that we need. Um, and then use those other people in other ways so that they can flourish and their mission can flourish.
All of this
Yeah.
is music to our ears. Like literally, you could be if I ever come down with anything and get abducted by aliens, you could just step into the co-host position where you just show up, and you're the co-host
I'm so
because
glad to hear that. I was worried that was too harsh.
no, and I think
Not at
I,
all.
I think that's it's the reality of it, right? Like when we talk about a professional atmosphere, you're either cut out for the job or you're not. That doesn't necessarily mean, I think this is why we're scared to say it, is because when we say, hey, you're not the right fit for this role, people take that to the extent of, well, then this isn't the church for me. So I'm leaving the
Yes,
church,
that's right. Yes.
which isn't necessarily true. It's just
No.
we want to play to your strengths. We want to play to what the church needs at this time, and it may not be you.
Preach.
Absolutely.
When go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Well, I think it also happens that same self-selection, if the leader is not setting a vision, he's not setting a bar, he's not calling people forward and forming them to step up into to level up to that next level of ministry, to continue to get better, to grow into the position. When that doesn't happen, that same self-selection happens when somebody says, "I'm ready for more," and this church can't handle it. They can't handle it. There's
That's
no
right.
room for me to grow here. I've
Yeah.
plateaued, and I'm 28 years old, and I'm like on fire to do something with my life, and I can't do it here. So now I need to move out into the secular world where they're like hungry for people like me who want to build and win and be successful. And so
Mhm.
there's a natural, if we don't answer that desire in our professionals' hearts as leaders, then suddenly they self-select out anyway because they're not being led.
Yeah, yeah. We need to give people the space to really build professional careers, I think. Like, build a space where they can grow, where they can be challenged, where their ideas, as long as they're like on mission, right? Like as long as it's within what we feel God is really asking. Like, because I think that can be the danger, right? Like you have somebody that's like, well, I'm not able to grow here. And it's like, well, that's because you're actually not, pursuing what we're pursuing as an organization or as an
Mhm.
agency or as a ministry. But yeah, if I think we need to give people that space to really grow. And when we find like good employees that have that real potential and that call, like you can just kind of see like the anointing on somebody's life. We
Mhm.
gotta fan the flame.
Totally agree. So earlier you'd mentioned a couple of the things that we've mentioned in previous podcasts with those assessments, right? The Myers-Briggs,
Yeah.
um, the, you call, even if you wanted to do the Enneagram or whatever, the personality tests. So we're talking about tools. What tools do you think every parish needs to have in their tool belt for the 21st century, really?
Yeah. Yeah. I I think one of the most important tools is some sort of team um team formation, team training. I so I've received training from Evangelium Consulting Group. I've actually gone through their training twice, and it's all based on Pat Lencioni's leadership stuff. So like the 5 dysfunctions of a team, which I think you guys have mentioned on here before.
I love Palanchoni.
It's so good. It's so good. And I would say, so I went through on 2 different teams that I've been on. I went through training with like I said, we used Evangelium Consulting Group. So with Keith Borchers, who's kind of a friend of Pat Lencioni, but
Mhm.
does this specifically in the Catholic world. And it was so transformative because it gave my team a common language. It gave my team like a freedom to hold accountable to what we all agreed we were going to do and how we were going to behave and how we were going to act. And it gave us a structure to continue to like move the ball down the field, which I think has just been extraordinarily helpful, like in just how our meeting's structured. So for example, we do weekly tactical meetings that are 2 hours long, and like work gets done. Like it's not meeting soup, it's very intentional, and everybody brings stuff to the table. So it's not just the leader saying, okay, here's what we're going to talk about today. Like, no, I want to know from my team, what do we need to talk about? And so it really like gains this kind of interaction from the team. And then we also have quarterly strategic meetings, which are day-long meetings that really take a step out of the office and look at, all right, what's the most important thing right now? Like if we were going to accomplish one thing in the next 4 months that would move the ball farther down the field, what would it be? And so that's just been super helpful to have like, all right, here's how we're going to do our meetings. Here's how we're going to function as a team. Here's how we're going to get to gain better trust as a team. It's like all integrated, which is vulnerability based exercises and that sort of thing. So, and I know there's other, groups that do that. I think Amazing Parish does something pretty similar. I've heard great things about that training. But some sort of team training, how to behave as a team, how to function as a team, uh, get vulnerable as a team, that sort of thing. Um, Honestly, I feel like that would be my biggest tool because you can figure all the other stuff out. Like there's a million and one great softwares and great databases and um, all that kind of stuff. And I think if you have the right people on your team, they're going to do the work to figure out what it is that you need. But you need a space for those people to each do their work and then bring it back to the table and keep the ball moving forward.
Yeah, momentum begets momentum, right? So
Yeah, well said.
if well, and when a team is winning, right? When they can tell that they're achieving together, suddenly everybody wants to step up to that plate, be accountable to each other and really follow through on those commitments. And so then yeah, like you said, that well, we realized, well, we could really use this kind of database, or we could use this tool to help us do X, Y, and Z. So somebody's got to have that skill to be able to find it, and they're going to do it because they want to get to that next goal set. And so if you've got that culture of success, that culture of buy-in where people are moving forward, yeah, I think you're spot on there.
Yeah, that's so good. Momentum begets momentum. And it really does because it feels good as a team to feel like you're winning and to feel like you're crossing things off and to feel like, all right, guys, we're doing it. Oh my gosh, look at us go, look at us grow. Sharing those glory stories and that sort of thing. Like that's a powerful bonding mechanism that actually motivates the team to keep going. That's so good.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it'd be silly if we didn't ask this next question right here. And so this next question is it's about those tools that help you to succeed. It's about how you really balance the spiritual side of ministry with that practical side because you need to set goals, which means some kind of number has to be set. So it's not about the numbers, but also it's a little bit about the numbers. And so
Right,
how do you
right.
balance the practical side, the spiritual side, and moving all that forward?
Oh man, I would love to hear you guys' answer to this too, because I think it's hard.
Mhm.
Honestly, I think this is really, really hard because like I can point to um I can point to one-off powerful testimonies of what God is doing in and through the Lord Center. Um, but if I'm only basing our growth and success off of the one-off stories of testimony, like I'm not balanced, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And as a leader, like I need to be aware, okay, what's the big picture though? Like are we knocking it out of the park, 10% of the time, 50% of the time, 95% of the time? Um, a couple years ago, this was like maybe actually just a year ago, I was reading the gospel and it was about the fertile soil and casting the
Mhm.
seeds, dropping the seeds, and some are on thorns and some are on rocky soil, right? And I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me, so I can't remember what the verse is, but and it got to this point about the fertile soil, and there was this longing that like rose up in me to look for fertile soil and to work in the fertile soil. Um, which kind of took me by surprise, um, because I don't know, I kind of love the Rocky people, you know? Um, but and
Me?
that's not to say right, right.
Us.
Um, no,
Thank you for
I
that.
no, and I shouldn't even say that because like of course the fertile soil is often like it looks like the us, right? Like it looks like
Mhm.
the sinners, the messed up, the lost, the like the broken, it's us. Um, but I just was really, really convicted to look for the fertile soil and plant seeds there. And so one of the things that we've just like really worked to do at the Lord Center is uh is to do outreach where there's fertile ground, to go to
Mhm. Mhm.
communities where we know we're going to be received and that people are going to be hungry for what we can offer, and to do programs where there's fertile ground. Um, and we've tried a couple of things that like haven't been super successful. And so we've said, okay, as much as like I'm trying to think of a good example. Oh, we tried to so miscarriage, just people who have experienced miscarriage, like that's really been on my mind and heart. And we tried to do an event for women or for couples who have miscarried, and we had one person register. One person
Mhm.
register. And I was so bummed because I was like, "Oh man, like God, I feel like this is what you're asking us to do," and all those things. And maybe he's going to bring it back about. Like I would not be surprised if he brings it back about, um but it didn't get off the ground. And I thought, okay, have we done everything we can? Did we promote it? Did we invite people? Yes, yes. Um, what maybe this just isn't, maybe the time isn't ripe. So we kind of stepped back from trying to continue to like push that and tried something different. And um and what we did instead, which is a series on healing, like a 4-week series, just more general approach to healing of emotional wounds and that sort of thing. Like it's just exploded. It's done really, really well, and we're getting more and more people coming each round. And so that's just one example, right? And like that's not to say that we don't care about and or still want to do things or minister to people who have miscarried, but like okay, there was fertile ground here that clearly it was resonating, and so we want to continue to foster that. So I think part of just balancing, the to your question, the balancing of the spiritual side, which is the real practical side, is like what's landing? Where is there fertile ground and where is it landing? And are people picking up what you're putting down? Is it
Mhm.
resonating with them in a way that they're like, ah, this is for me, that there's a longing to be there, there's a longing to participate, there's a recognition of a need. Um, so I think those are a couple of things. And I would just also say, like, as the executive director in my agency, like I oversee, our funding and all of those kinds of things. And those things are critically important. Like it allows us, if we do that well, we can do ministry well. So I think that practical side is so important. Um, but I think we also want to set it up in such a way that it doesn't like take up all the energy in the room. Like if my like I got into ministry because I love ministry, because I love the Lord, and because the Lord asked me to pursue this. But I think if I were so like consumed with the financial reports and the the invoices that I need to sign and the emails in my inbox and whatever, like I think I would get really burnt out. So figuring out kind of for me, like I have typically kind of a one admin day where I deep dive into, signing the things and making sure that all of those, key critical pieces, and of course it's sprinkled throughout the week too. But, and then I try and like spend a lot of time actually doing what does give me life, um, which is more the ministry component. So I don't
Mhm.
know. Those are some thoughts, but it's a tricky balance. I think it's a really hard balance.
I think so too, but I think you hit it on the head there. And I'll be honest, that fertile soil line has been in my mind and my heart lately. I'm working a little teaser for the listeners. I am working on writing the Catholic ministry professionals like book. So it'll be a framework for getting stuff done, for having better conversations, doing better work, and becoming better leaders.
That's
And
so exciting.
that fertile soil line is on the top of my mind because I think that's key to real leadership because what it says, this is Luke 8:15, and I don't know if that's the same, it shows up a couple times, that parable of the sower, but it says the fertile soil is those who hear the word and with a pure and good heart they hold on to it and they yield
Mm,
fruit with patience. And that to
yield
me
fruit.
is kind of key to that. It's paramount to that. And the other thing that popped into my head as you were talking was St. Augustine has a quote where he says, pray as though it depends on God, but work as though it depends on you.
Yeah.
And to me, between those two, there's a really good balance there, that praying as though it depends on God, right? Yes, you're looking for fertile soil, but you are also the soil that God is cultivating. So if you want to be a good leader in ministry, you have to be cultivated. You have to be fertile soil. And you're only going to do that if you are connected to the Lord Jesus Christ in real prayer, sitting
Hmm.
before him at his feet, receiving from him, which you're doing when you discern those directions. And we maybe don't always discern the exact way to do it. We don't always get it right the first time, but then we come back and we do it again. We bear fruit with patience with ourselves,
Mm,
patience with the process, with the timing, and bearing that fruit is working as though it depends on you, because Jesus makes it pretty darn clear in the Gospels that he expects fruit, and if you are
yeah.
not bearing fruit, you're gonna get pruned right off the
Yeah.
tree,
Yeah. You're going to get
and
right.
yeah, I mean
Thrown in the
that's
fire.
just thrown into fire. That's what Jesus tells us, especially for those who step into that position of leadership into the
Mm,
church, are called into it. There's a higher standard even. So if you are not bearing fruit, that's something to really discern and pray and be with. But just a reality that there should be fruit. I'm not saying it has to be 100-fold or anything like that, or what that exactly looks like is going to be dependent. But there should be fruit. And so yeah,
hmm.
just balancing both those. I think that real balance, it comes from depending on work, praying as though it depends on God and working as though it depends on you, which is
Yeah.
kind of a catch-all phrase, but for me, that's where I've landed.
That's so good. I remember one of my mentors just going on this rant, and it was so memorable for me about how so often he would hear ministry professionals say something along the lines of like, "Well, we're just planting seeds." And he just went off and he was like, "You know what? If a farmer came to you and just said, "Well, I'm just planting seeds," that would actually be a terrible farmer. Like farmers, they plant seeds and then they water the seeds and then they fertilize the ground. Maybe not all in that order. I don't know. I'm not a farmer. And then they go and they
I
like
am
weed and
was
they like make sure that there's not infestations growing and they're like
Mhm.
really attentive. They walk the fields, right? And I just remember being so struck by that. Like, that's wow, yeah, that's right. Like, if we have this mentality of like, well, we're just planting seeds, and don't get me wrong, like we can't take false responsibility either. Like,
Mhm.
people are human beings and they have free will, praise God, and we can't, like I can't do the work for them. But are we just hoping to plant seeds or are we hoping to bear fruit? And those are two
Mhm.
very, very different things, you know?
That
Yeah,
line just reminds me of, like, I don't wanna be held liable for anything that I say, so it's like, "Hey, what do I know?" Yeah, "Hey,
Right.
oh,
do
Yes.
yeah.
whatever you want," but that's what I think, and that's, you know what?
Interesting. Which is interesting, and this is, like, way deeper than we have time to go right now, but that's in some ways, that's a shame response in us, So one of the things
Mhm.
we talk a lot about at the Lourdes Center is shame and just how that shows up, and or how wounds show up. And one of the ways that wounds often show up in us is kind of like, well, it is what it is, or yeah, what do I know? That's there's usually a wound kind of underlying that's going on, and we don't have time to dive into like what that might be, but but it comes out of shame, of like a hiding ourselves, or of not wanting to be put on the put on the, I don't want to say chopping block, but held accountable. um yeah, it's an interesting thing how that can kind of come out sideways in us.
So
Mm.
then when you're looking and talking about fertile soil, I know what I do in every area of my life is I look to see where other people are doing what I want to do.
Yeah,
So where do you see ministry being done well?
yeah.
This is your time to brag on somebody.
Yeah, I'm such a copycat in so many ways. Um, I really am a fan of the work of the John Paul II Healing Center, the JPII Healing Center, which is led by Dr. Bob Schutz. They have just exploded across the nation, and have really actually gotten into ministry to priests and bishops.
Mm,
In the last, I don't know, really in the last decade, I would say. I was blessed to go to one of their retreats, and I've read Dr. Bob's books. Um, and I just want, like, we're trying to build a mini JP2 healing center in the Diocese of Sioux Falls, because they're just doing extraordinary work. They're doing incredible
mm.
healing work. Um, and it's clearly anointed, and it's integrated with the psychological sciences. It's very human, which is so beautiful. So I would say that. He also has a podcast called Restore the Glory, that he does with Jake Kim, which I'm a big fan of. And I have found that really, really helpful. Um, Man, those are like the key places that kind of come to my mind. I really like the Abiding Together podcast too. I think those women are doing beautiful, beautiful work, just like speaking to the heart, specifically of women. I know there's some men that listen too, um, but yeah, I think they just do beautiful, beautiful work.
You just named 3, like, 3 different or 2 podcasts that my wife loves. So the one was it Abiding
We
Together? Is that the
Yeah,
one you just
yeah, yeah,
said?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, Brooke and I
that's the
have
one that
similar
she
tastes. That does not surprise me.
yeah, and then, she made me, and I willingly entered into it once she explained that she
Yeah,
wanted me to. They did the Restore the Glory podcast did a series on, like, marital unity, and they had 3 or
yeah.
4 episodes that took out these different areas, and honestly, when I read it or when I started listening, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna listen to this." They're
Touchy-feely.
men talk about their feelings.
Yep.
Classic.
And as I was listening, I was like,
It
"No,
rocked
this
your
is
world.
me. This
Yeah,
is
it
Yeah.
me,"
rocked
and
your
it
world.
touched me, yeah, and then we actually we started meeting with a group of friends, like a First Friday group here in our town, and passed it on to them to say, "Hey, we should discuss this as a group," because it was so good for our marriage to have some, language, some vernacular to be able to use to identify and communicate about specific things that, all marriages deal with.
What a
So,
good
I
idea.
I I'll back you up there. I'll say those are great resources for people.
Yeah. What a good idea too, to like extend it beyond your marriage and invite it into, the group of couples that you meet with, because then that has such a ripple effect. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's really cool. We should do that with our friends. That's a great idea. I love that.
So,
Those are the key ones that
Yeah.
come to my mind right now.
okay, well, those are really awesome because Sister Miriam is really cool. So, like, she's one of my favorite,
I
on
love
Abiding
her.
Together. Yeah.
I love her. Yeah, she talk about somebody that's anointed to do the work that they've been asked to do. I mean, like, yeah, if you've ever seen her speak in real life, or listen to her on the podcast or watch a video or whatever, like, there's just something that kind of makes you want to lean in. I feel like she just has
Yep.
Mhm.
such a tender heart. And in fact, maybe I would even say, like, I watching her present at the last, oh man, it's gonna make me cry. Watching her present at the last retreat that I went to, or the last conference that I was at, that she was speaking, her motherly and tender presence transformed the way that I work and the way that I
Mhm.
present on what I present. She just was so she emphasized so beautifully Jesus's compassion and his tenderness, and the fact that Jesus doesn't push himself on you. And I mean, there was just so many lines. Like, she led us through this meditation, and she said, like, if you're okay with it, just when you're okay with it, like, maybe you want to let Jesus come alongside you, and if you're not ready yet, that's okay. But she was just so tender to the hearts that were in front of her. um and it totally transformed the way that I present, the way that I lead, because I can be a little bit of a bulldozer, or like pretty direct. Shocking, I know.
No.
Um,
I would
and
never say that. Not aloud.
not out loud, at least. But I really like. I think if you, I think if you were to ask people that like just went through this 4-week series on healing what their experience was, I think one of the things that they would say was that it was one of compassion and one of tenderness.
Hmm.
And that's totally a fruit of me observing this in Sister Miriam, and saying, like, that changed the room. Her presence and how she approached that changed the room, and it allowed Jesus to show up in a new way. And I want to do that. I want to do that for people. It was really powerful.
Yeah, I could fanboy over Sister Miriam all night, but we got to keep going. Maybe you've said it already, but what's your favorite ministry resource right now?
I feel like, in addition to the JPII Healing Center, which I think is really a ministry resource, um, I've been working with Tilma, or with, excuse me, Glass Canvas. I did some work with Glass Canvas out of Canada. They're a marketing platform, marketing agency. Basically, their whole mission is to, oh man, how did they word it? Like, to unlock your ministry potential, or something like that. And I basically hired them to do just our website, and as part of that, they have a database and email newsletters and that sort of thing. But I, had a great relationship with them, and so they were super generous to get on a few extra calls with me to talk about branding. And like, I love the marketing side of ministry. I think it's so fun. And so I really benefited from conversations with Glass Canvas about what do we want our brand to be, because we rebranded when I came on. And we talked about colors, and are you more this or more this or whatever. And I was like, oh my gosh, Pierre, he was from Canada. Pierre, like, I don't know. And he was just really great about like walking me through all of that. Oh, also really practical. I love Canva. I think Canva is an incredible tool for people who don't have design background, to be able to put out content that looks sharp, that looks on brand. I think if you're still using like Word to create your flyers, it's time. Canva is
Ethel.
a great, great resource.
Yep.
Some
So
people hate Canva. Design people hate Canva. I think it's great for people who don't have design backgrounds.
I'm going to
'Cause it's
call and
taking their
say
jobs.
eventually Canva is going to sponsor us.
Because so many people say that they love it.
But
Yeah.
But it
This is
Mostly
the
John,
point.
though.
It makes people's work easier, and it makes it look better and more professional. It's great.
Yeah. It's interesting that you talk about, with this Glass Canvas, the branding and the colors and all this. Like, I thought we were supposed to be Jesus freaks. Like, why are we talking about corporate secular stuff?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's
I
going on
always
there?
say,
yeah, all that
I
corporate
always say,
vernacular.
yeah. I would say this is why we build beautiful cathedrals. Like, the church was
Mm.
on to beauty way before the corporate world was on to beauty. And we understand the power of beauty. I remember this priest who taught me my freshman year of college. Um, he he was talking about, like, transcendence and beauty as a transcendental. And he said good fashion designers understand this. And my like 18-year-old ears perked up. Like, I love clothes. You wouldn't be able to tell right now as I'm like in my sweats and whatnot. But and he said good fashion designers understand this because it elevates and it raises the mind and the heart to something beyond merely what is there. And I was like, oh dang, oh my gosh, like that was really powerful to me. And I always think like this is why we build beautiful cathedrals. This is why we build worship spaces. This is why we decorate our homes in ways that are beautiful and that, cultivate what matters. And I think the same can be said of like how are we representing ourselves? Like our brand is our digital home. So when
Mhm.
people land on our web pages, when they land in our email newsletters or whatever, like what's their experience? Does it feel beautiful? Does it feel welcoming? Does it feel homey? Does it feel tender? Does it feel strong? What does it feel? And what do we want them to feel? And I think those things really matter. I think it's so important. It's not everything, but I think it's a big thing.
So good.
That'll preach. Okay, Emily, if you had the attention of
Man,
the
you guys
whole
can
world
like
for
get me
90
going and I
seconds,
just start.
I know. If you had the attention of the whole world for 90 seconds, what would you say?
Hmm. I would say hmm, the greatest gift that you can give to yourself, to your spouse, to your kids, to your workplace, to your ministry, to the places that you exist in the world. The greatest gift that you can give is to do your own work, is to pursue holiness, is to pursue virtue, um, and to allow Jesus in his great, great tenderness and great compassion and in all his goodness to come in and heal those places of our hearts that so desperately need to be healed by his tender loving touch. Like doubting Thomas, like here, Jesus, like this beautiful Caravaggio image, like Jesus is pulling Thomas's hand, and you can just see Jesus saying, like, here, I will show you. I will show you the wounds because you're not ready to show me your wounds yet, but I am such a gentleman that I will let you see mine first. Come and see, come and touch my wounds. Um, and in that, there's this vulnerability where Jesus is saying, I will let you touch my wounds, and I desire to touch yours. I desire to shower the blood and water on those places in your life. Um, and I think when we allow him to do that, we show up differently. Healing has real, concrete, beautiful consequences. And I mean that in a good way. Consequences like sign of change that happen in us. I think we do better. I think we flourish more. It doesn't get easier. Um, but I think we step more boldly into who God wants us to be. And if we all did that, like, look out. Look out, world. That's what I'd say.
Amen.
So I was a little bit taken when you talked about like this agency that you have. Like the thing that popped out in my mind is like she found her Calcutta.
Oh man. Wow.
Like
Yeah.
just listening to the passion in your voice and just the conviction in what you're saying reminded me of like, okay, it doesn't matter if I help out 100 people at this event. I know the one, the on miscarriage, only one person signed up, but bringing that attention and just knowing that that person has a place to go for those things, like what an impact. That's like Jesus leaving the 99, right? And finding
Mm-hmm.
that one.
Mm-hmm.
So awesome stuff. Where can our listeners go to connect with you or support your ministry?
Yeah, the LourdesCenter.com. So it's Lourdes, like Lourdes, France, Our Lady of Lourdes, which is a premier pilgrimage site for healing in the world. So the LourdesCenter.com is our website. People can always email me too if they want to connect directly. You can find our email on there, tlc@sfcatholic. Isn't that great? The Lourdes Center, our acronym is TLC. So
Mm,
like you need a little
That is
TLC,
perfect.
isn't that great? So theLordCenter.com, you can email me directly, and I'd love to connect with people anytime.
I was actually going to say TLC is in T-Baw's Left Eye and Chili of the group. TLC. I'm sorry.
Don't go chasing waterfalls.
She gets it.
Yes.
Are we going to get sued for me singing that on your podcast? It's like
I hope so. That'd be great press.
Yes.
that would be really good press, actually.
Yep.
Oh, man, that's funny.
So then I asked this question before of, where do you see ministry being done really well? But here's the next question. Who do you think we should have on the podcast next?
Oh, man, this is fun. Okay, you're having my friend Shane Van Dees next week, right?
Yep.
Love him. I was going to say him. Have you had Chris Bergwald?
We haven't. Actually, I was thinking I should reach out to him earlier, and I've got his name on a list of people to reach out to.
Chris would be great.
Okay.
Yeah, because he's a good example of somebody that's just like been in it for a while, and I think has remained just so faithful. And I don't know, like I just think he's doing really beautiful work in the vineyard. I also, you know who else I love? Jen Mosier. Have you talked to Jen Mosier yet? She's great. She's in Omaha. Like just a stunning soul. She would be a really cool. She's worked in diocesan work for a good couple of years now. Has a background in campus ministry. So there's a couple people that come to my mind. If you want to go big, I would love Sarah Swafford is like one of my personal fan or I'm like a fangirl of Sarah Swafford. So if you're feeling really gutsy and you're gonna go for the big shots, get Sarah Swafford on.
We
And
have the
then
big shot
invite
right
me
now.
so that I can yeah, right. But
The
invite me so that
Swaffinator?
I can join the conversation and meet her because I just think she's great.
You haven't met her yet? Huh.
No, have you?
Subtle
yeah,
flex.
like 2 or 3 times, but that's fine.
Ever.
When I was still working at in the Catholic school system, we had her out to speak at our high school. And so I got to hang out with her for like, I don't know, half an hour or 45 minutes. And I was thinking I wanted to be this big national speaker. And
Yeah.
she said something that really made me go, oh, I better make sure I want to do this. But she told me that no one is under more spiritual attack than somebody who steps out publicly in the name of the Lord.
Yeah.
So she did that, and it really pumped the brakes for me a little bit to go like, oh, I got to make sure I got my house in order here. I really got to make sure this is what God is calling me to do, and it's not just the Gospel of John,
Oh, man, that's
she's
so awesome.
she's the real deal. She ain't no joke.
You know, that was my experience of Jason Everett too. I met him at a conference, and I just was so moved by his faithfulness, by his humility, by his, you know who you should have. Okay, hold on, I'm gonna come back to that. By his faithfulness, his humility, his joy, just the way that he showed up. But he was like, I'm here to work, but also where's mass and where's the chapel? And like he just was such a man of prayer the whole time. It was really, really powerful to see. You should have Nick Davidson.
He would be fun.
Nick Davidson?
Yeah, absolutely.
He is a hoot, and he is like so on mission. He would be a great guest for you guys. He's really fun.
Absolutely. Put in a good word for us with him. I don't know if he'll remember me, but we've met.
Tell him that you know Emily Leedom, because every like 2 years I get a voice text from him. And it just is, it's like the best part every 2 years.
He's great. Well, so Emily, this has been a great conversation. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Yes,
we really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys.
And thank you, dear listener. Absolutely. Thank you, dear listeners, for listening to the Catholic Ministry Podcast. If you want to transform your parish through your work, but you're not sure where to start, we want you to download our free parish health assessment at catholicministryprofessionals.com/free assessment. It's 36 questions, and it only takes about 5 minutes to fill out. Afterwards, you're going to have a color-coded picture of your parish's health that you can use to fuel better conversations, prioritize better work, and become a better leader. Also, you can request a free consultation and email us feedback at catholicminpros@gmail.com.
And with that, we'll see you in the vineyard.